Coming of age ceremony. This is a story I experienced when I was still in my 20s, hitchhiking from place to place with a single backpack. That day I was hitchhiking on the main street from daylight to dusk. Usually they stop rather quickly, but that day I was at a loss because I didn't get caught until it started to get dark around there. I had only a few coins in my wallet. I was sitting on a bench at a nearby bus stop, a little tired, when a light truck pulled up at a distance. I took this as my chance and called out to him, and inside was an elderly man who seemed to be a good person. When I explained the situation, the man said, "I'll give you a ride to my village," and he gladly offered me a ride. The car was going into the foothills of the mountains, and the view from the window was becoming more and more natural. While I was having a casual chat with the man, the light truck suddenly stopped. The man said, "I have to walk from here, it's a bit far, is that okay?" The man asked, and I thought about it for a moment, but quickly replied and got out of the car. I thought that since I had come this far, I might as well ask him to stay the night anyway, so I walked deeper into the mountains without caution, partly because I was young and partly because I had allowed myself to be intimidated by his friendliness. I was out of breath because of the mountain path, but the man in question was climbing up the mountain without breaking a sweat. I thought it was natural since he has lived here for many years, but to be honest, I was surprised that his steps were lighter than they looked. After about an hour of climbing, we came to an open area and found a small village in the back. The man told me that it was a rundown village with a few single elderly men and elderly couples, including himself, and no young people or children. I entered the village and was taken to the man's house. As is typical in the countryside, a few men from other houses came in to have a drink and welcomed us. From there, until dinner, the men, who reeked of alcohol, dug deep into my mind, telling me stories about their travels in the youth of today, and I was sick of it. As the conversation turned to the village, one of the men began to talk about the customs of the village, and I was somewhat intrigued. The story goes that the ceremony has been held since ancient times as a custom when a child comes of age. Boys who have reached the age of 12 are gathered at night at a shrine in the back of the village, and one by one they pass through a torii gate and are chosen by a shrine maiden to become an adult on that day. The boys who were not chosen would return to the village and wait another year before their coming of age ceremony. The important thing here is that the boys who were chosen remain at the shrine with the Miko. They stay at the shrine with the Miko, have dinner in a large room, and are guided by the Miko up a mountain path further into the village. At the end of the path, there is a small hut where some of the boys stay the night. I had heard that it was a custom to test one's courage, but the next words of the old man made my blood run cold. "And then, you will be eaten in that hut by the god." When I asked him what he meant, he scratched his head and elaborated. But what he said was even more incomprehensible. The hut where the boys stay is in the sanctuary of the so-called mountain god. At midnight, there is a scratching sound on the hut wall from outside, and the boys begin to cry. Then a priestess opens the door and talks to someone outside. A little later, at the Miko's signal, something tall and white appears in the hut. It looks down at the boys as if it is sizing them up, then reaches out and grabs one of them and, lo and behold, it slowly begins to mingle with them in the back of the hut. The boys, who had been crying and screaming, continue to watch, their voices hushed by the strangeness of it all and their inexpressible curiosity. The tall, white mass of flesh, which was straddling the boys and shaking its body, screamed and shrieked like a beast. The boy forgets his fear and crying, and clings to it as it straddles him, his face in ecstasy. As soon as one boy ends up, other boys become targets. And each time they begin to magwai. The boys, seemingly drained of their souls, are taken out by the Miko outside and brought back to the shrine. When the last man is left, the tall, white figure crawls toward him, dripping bodily fluids, and attacks him with a voice even more animalistic than before. By the time the boy wakes up, there is no one in the hut. The door opens, and the shrine maiden takes the boy back to the shrine for breakfast, completing the coming-of-age ritual. When the conversation is over, the old men laugh and say how much they have missed the old days. I was sweating all over my body and thinking about that white something. I asked him about the white something, sweating profusely, and he said, "That must be a god." I heard that it was a custom to sacrifice to the god in order to become a healthy adult, but I didn't think it was a god at all. That night we had a party, and my uncle stayed the night, and I was allowed to stay in a separate room. As I dozed off during the night, I heard a knock at the door. A little scared, I thought it might be the landlord's man, but when I opened the door, I saw a white, gangly figure standing there, about 2 meters tall. As I stood there, frozen in fear, the something seemed to be standing close to me with its head wrapped around a bill-like object, asking me what I was looking at. As I struggled to catch my breath and continued to look at it, I saw that it seemed to be dressed in white. It had arms and legs and even had long, disheveled hair. I was able to move a little and took steps backward, but there was no sign of an attack, it just seemed to be watching me. I decided that what I saw in front of me was not as dangerous as I thought and gently tried to close the door. However, the moment I put my hand on the door, the white-robed thing grabbed my arm and came straight into the hut. Unlike before, I could sense a strange smell and a deadly atmosphere from the thing in front of me. It grabbed me with both hands and slowly lifted me up and laid me on the floor. From there, my memory of what happened next is a blur, as if I had blacked out from fear and the sheer strangeness of the situation. When I woke up, I found myself in the cabin where I had stayed yesterday. There was nothing unusual in the room, and I could not smell the strange smell I had felt last night. As I was packing up my belongings, there was a knock at the door, and when I answered it, it was the owner of the house. He apologized for keeping me up late last night, but told me that breakfast was ready and to come over when I was finished getting ready. While sitting around the table eating breakfast with the landlord, I looked around the room, remembering yesterday. The landlord asked me, "What's bothering you?" I told him a little about yesterday. Then the landlord, who had been smiling up to that point, suddenly turned expressionless and said, "I've had no men for a long time. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to stay here another night." I couldn't say no to the landlord's strange mood, so I stayed at the house that night as well. I did not experience any particular fear after that, but I was afraid of that unidentifiable something and the villagers who did not think the custom was abnormal. The old men in the village told me that the custom is now gone, but I don't know if that is true. Perhaps it is still practiced and some boys are still experiencing that fear. This is the end of this story. Thank you for listening to the end.